Curious about what Huberman and Galpin covered in their nearly 5-hour-long conversation? Well, I've taken all the notes for you. In this video, I will cover all the protocols Galpin shared for hypertrophy. In hypertrophy, the goal is to stimulate muscle growth. This can be done in many ways. The key is going high volume, the total sets and reps, or high intensity. The signal has to be either frequent or loud. The only combination that does not work is low intensity and low volume, because this won't provide a strong enough signal to trigger muscle growth. You can stimulate hypertrophy through different mechanisms. 1. Mechanical tension, means lifting heavy weights. 2. Metabolic stress, high rep sets or even short rest periods. 3. Muscle damage, breakdown of muscle fibers during exercise. This means muscle damage is not one of the mechanisms of hypertrophy that is necessary to happen. It's just one of the ways. How to structure your hypertrophy training? There's a debate between body part splits like a traditional chest day and a leg day versus full body workouts. Both can work, but what matters most is your total weekly volume per muscle group, ensuring every muscle group gets enough attention over the week. Another effective approach is to choose exercises based on the movement patterns, such as pushing, pulling, or hip hinge. But none of these will work if you are not consistent. The key is consistency. Body part split programs are more vulnerable to life disruptions. Missing a split workout could mean you're not training a muscle group for nearly 2 weeks, which isn't ideal. So full body workouts 3 times a week are more adaptable to interruptions. This way, each muscle group is trained every 48 to 72 hours. You can also mix a full body sessions with the splits. What exercises to choose? It's important to include a mix of bilateral and unilateral exercises in your training. In a bilateral exercise, like squats, both sides working together. But unilateral exercises target one limb at a time, like single leg squats or Bulgarian squats. Doing both bilateral and unilateral exercises is crucial for strength and preventing muscle imbalances. Start with big compound movements, since they derive most of your muscle growth. However, how you perform these exercises can affect which muscles are targeted. For example, in a squat, a high bar position emphasizes your quads, while a lower bar position might involve more glutes. If a particular exercise isn't effectively targeting the muscles you want, machines can be helpful. They allow you to isolate muscles without worrying about balance or form, which can be essentially helpful if your body mechanics or technique are limiting the exercise's effectiveness. In hypertrophy, if balance development and symmetry are your goals, you can adjust your training to fit your genetic and natural variations. For example, if you naturally have stronger lats, excessive chin-ups might not be necessary. Or if a particular muscle group grows easily, you can reduce the volume to avoid overdevelopment while maintaining your muscles. It's important not to eliminate exercises unless you're injured. Minimal work, like 1 set to failure each week, can help keep those muscle groups engaged without significantly increasing their size. How many sets should we do? The minimum volume for hypertrophy is 10 working sets per week per muscle group. However, most people, especially those more advanced, might need closer to 15 to 20 sets per week to see growth. For example, if you do 5 sets of squats 3 times a week, you have already hit 15 sets for most muscles in your legs. You can mix in other exercises like deadlifts or split squats to cover other muscles without needing long workouts. When counting sets, consider whether the muscle is a primary or secondary mover in an exercise. For example, biceps in a chin-up are primary movers, so they should be counted. However, if they are secondary, like in pull-ups, only count them if you really feel them working. How many reps to do? To induce hypertrophy, aim for an effective repetition range between 4 and 30 reps per set. but the key is to get close to muscle failure by the end of the set. You don't have to go to absolute failure, but you should be within 2 reps of failure, which is known as reps in reserve. This means the last few reps should feel very challenging. Failure is when you can no longer move the weight through the full range of motion with good form. It's safer to push to failure on less complex exercises like machines rather than heavy compounds like squats. Traditionally, in hypertrophy, it is recommended to do 8 to 15 reps per set. But these numbers aren't strict rules. For example, training in the 4 to 8 rep range can yield both strength and hypertrophy gains. But remember that the signal has to be either frequent or loud. So if you go less reps, then it needs to be done with more weight. I've made other videos summarizing Galpin and Huberman talks on protocols for power and strength, as well as other summaries of Huberman Lab podcast. If this is helpful, subscribe and follow along. Before discussing tempo in hypertrophy training, let's quickly go over 2 important terms, concentric and eccentric. The concentric phase is when your muscle shortens as they work, such as when you lift a barbell in a deadlift or push it up in a bench press. This is where you are working against gravity or cable tension. The eccentric phase is when your muscles lengthen under tension, when you're lowering the bar to the ground in a deadlift or bring it down to your chest in a bench press. When training for hypertrophy, the aim is to increase the duration your muscles are under tension, which can stimulate muscle growth with less weight or fewer reps. For that, you can use a 3-1-1 tempo or 5-1-1 or 5-2-3. The first number in the tempo refers to the eccentric phase. Like in a bench press, with a 3-1-1 tempo, you would lower the bar to your chest in 3 seconds, pause for 1 second, and push it up in 1 second. In a deadlift, this means lifting the bar off the ground in 1 second, pausing for 1 second, and then lowering it back down in 3 seconds. Make sure to learn the Valsalva technique for breathing, which is crucial for maintaining core stability during heavy lifts. What to do for warm-up and between sets? You can stretch as much as you need in your warm-up or between sets without worrying about reducing your hypertrophy gains. For hypertrophy, a little bit of warm-up without fatiguing yourself and making sure you're moving in the correct positions is enough. Something simple like a forearm curl doesn't require much warm-up, but for complex multi-joint movements like a squat, a more thorough warm-up is needed. For hypertrophy, the typical rest period between sets is 30 to 90 seconds to create a muscle pump. However, recent research shows you can rest up to 3 to 5 minutes without losing effectiveness, especially for moderately trained individuals or advanced people. If you rest longer, increase the weight or add more volume to the workout to keep the challenge high. Generally, sticking around to 2 minutes of rest time is a good balance. If you're short on time, let's say today you have only got half an hour. For hypertrophy, lower the load, reduce the rest intervals, and do more reps to get muscle fatigue. How to make sure you are progressing and not hitting plateaus. In hypertrophy training, it's not just about picking an exercise and going through the movement. You have modifiable variables like exercise selection, volume, intensity, and rest intervals, which you can manipulate to stimulate muscle growth. For example, you might choose heavier weights with fewer reps or lighter weights with more reps. Progression can be achieved by adding more weight, tension, or metabolic stress by reducing the rest time. If you are not seeing progress or hitting a plateau, it might mean that your body has adapted to your current routine. To break through, consider increasing your training volume by adding more sets or reps or even extra day of training each week, or going heavier and doing less repetitions. You can also switch up your exercises, but what matters is tracking your progress. Without tracking, it's harder to identify what's working and what's not working. To make sure you're getting enough recovery, consider both local muscle recovery and systemic recovery. For local muscle recovery, gauge your soreness on a scale of 1 to 10. If you're more than a 3 out of 10, consider training that muscle. If you're above 6, skip it entirely. For systemic recovery, pay attention to your sleep patterns and your HRV. If hypertrophy is your goal and you're feeling fatigued, do a lighter workout rather than skipping it entirely. This means lowering the intensity, reducing the range of motion, or switching to machine-based exercises to maintain volume without overloading your system. You can do cardio 2 to 3 days a week without disrupting hypertrophy progress, as long as you manage factors like energy intake and exercise selection. Avoid endurance exercises that heavily target the same muscle groups that you're trying to grow, especially running. Cycling is preferable because it causes less muscle damage. Ideally, separate cardio and lifting sessions. If that's not possible, then doing cardio after your lifting session is the next best option. Also, about interval training, it might support muscle growth due to the metabolic stress it creates. But don't overdo it, as it can affect your recovery and lifting performance. You need about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, or 2.2 grams per kilogram. Muscle growth requires a sufficient supply of amino acids for building muscle and energy coming from carbohydrates to fuel protein synthesis. Your body needs to be convinced to allocate these resources to muscle growth rather than other essential functions like immune support or red blood cell production. If protein intake is low or your training is focused on a specific muscle group, your body may redistribute protein from less used muscles to support the growth in the areas being trained heavily. So be careful with that. Now, one last word on what to avoid. Plyometrics is great for training explosiveness, but won't do much for hypertrophy. Also, Olympic weightlifting variations like a snatch or clean and jerk aren't ideal for hypertrophy because of their high risk-to-benefit ratio, which means their potential for injury outweighs the muscle growth benefits they offer, especially when safer alternatives exist. Also, avoid ice baths after your hypertrophy training, as they can blunt your muscle growth. A quick cold shower is fine, but full immersion should be avoided if hypertrophy is your goal. If recovery is your priority, then cold therapy could be helpful. Subscribe and follow along.